AVAIYA has changed my life.
AVAIYA has made me the woman I am today.
AVAIYA is my home.
AVAIYA is personal freedom.
AVAIYA is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about AVAIYA.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, AVAIYA, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.
Hello, AVAIYA family. I'm Andy Anderson. My partner, Ike Allen, and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of AVAIYA University. AVAIYA is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Laura Charanza, is back with us today to talk about overcoming roadblocks to your healing. Laura was raised by a narcissist. Then she married one and stayed with him for many years. After surviving years of narcissistic abuse, Laura dedicated her life to helping other survivors. She is also an author, and she lives in the Dallas area with her teenage son and 2 Labradoodles, Charlie and Maggie, which we just talked about. Yeah. Thanks for doing this again, Laura.
You're welcome. You never know when one will make a present, so my apology.
Hey, ours is around too, so maybe they'll both or all make presences today in a very important conversation. So why don't we talk a little bit about your background? Like, if you could summarize your own personal experience with narcissistic abuse for us, that would be fabulous.
I was raised by a narcissist, as you mentioned, a narcissistic mother. And then because we're so conditioned to that, as you know, we can choose a partner that mirrors that parent or any toxic person from our childhood with whom we want to resolve some issues. So I chose yet another narcissist, even more sinister and more manipulative than the first. So.
Gotcha. And with your mother, was she like more of like an overt narcissist or covert narcissist? And I see Charlie, and that's totally fine that he's there. That's so exciting.
He's like, I want to talk about narcissism.
Hi, Charlie.
Your mom is okay now. Ask me that again. I'm sorry.
So was your mom more of like an overt narcissist or covert narcissist, would you say?
Oh, over. She was very flamboyant,
okay.
Very extreme highs, extreme lows. There may be, and we see a lot of that in narcissism, but I think there may have been an element of by being bipolar in that as well. But always the life of the party. She would put on parties a lot. She wanted to show off. Yes, very opinionated. And if someone didn't like her, well, then that's their problem.
Gotcha.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
And as far as, this happens fairly regularly for a lot of people who have been raised by a narcissist. Sometimes then, yes, they are going to be attracted to partner with one later in life. So could you share a little bit more about your marriage and how was it that how and when did you decide to leave that marriage?
That's a great question. So I'll tell you something which is so interesting is when I first met the man I would marry, another narcissist, I thought my mother is going to love him. And that's one reason that the way I was trained in childhood, it pushed me even more toward him. So that marriage lasted, we were together 16 years. It lasted 13 years. I started making the decision after I read that book by Lundy Bancroft. I bet you've picked it up. Why does he do that? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is who I'm married to. And so I methodically started planning my exit. And it took me about 3 years to plan. Now, if someone's in physical abuse, I know you agree with me, Andy, get out now. But there had not yet been any blatant physical abuse. He would block my way or grab my arm too tight. But so I methodically planned and got out of there.
Gotcha. And was he really similar to your mom in also being overt?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a great question. He had to be life of the party, had to be the best looking, would only socialize with people who he believed were at his level in a societal pecking order, which I even hate that he thought that there were pecking orders in society, but many narcissists do.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah. Interesting. So, okay. We have your background as obviously being raised by a narcissistic mother and then marrying a narcissistic man and then leaving that relationship. How, I would imagine there'd be some healing to do after after all those years, can you share a little bit about how you started your own healing journey?
I think knowledge is power, first of all. So even just reading that book there's so many great books out there about narcissism. Jonathan McKenzie has one, Psychopath Free, I believe, or something like that.
So.
Then there's Catherine McBride has one about narcissistic mothers, Lundy Bancroft. So I read 4 or 5 books that really helped me understand what I was going through, so I could start my journey by, first of all, giving myself grace and understanding that it wasn't my fault, that these people are very good and they lure you in, and there is a way out, and it's okay that, you make a mistake and choose someone like that, because they're so believable. They even pull the wool over therapist eyes sometimes. So
right. And like, how long did it take you to get to a place of feeling like you, I don't know, healed a significant amount, or what was your experience?
I think even after just a regular divorce, it takes about a year to feel like life's getting back to normal. Then you add the part about narcissism on top, or divorcing a narcissist. I would say about 2 years, 2.5 years. At the 3-year mark, I had done so much work, because the more work you do in healing, the better, that I felt really good about life. But it was that first 0 to 2.5, 3 years that it's a lot of work.
And did you like link your childhood into that as well? Was that part?
Absolutely. That's why, it was so much work. We've got to figure out, and there are people that have married narcissists that their family's very healthy and supportive. In my case, it wasn't that way. So,
Gotcha.
And I did therapy, Andy. I had a lady I worked with that's a spiritual coach, a life coach, a recovery coach. We did a lot of healing work, writing letters to the people that had hurt us in our lives and then burning them, things like that. Lots of reading books, videos, seminars like this, but they were all like audible, not video now. It's so great that there's video too.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit more about that. And so for people watching right now who might be in a similar experience that you've had, what would you say some of the common roadblocks are that they face?
You probably will agree with me, trauma bonds, right? Which, if you're looking them up online, you can also look up Stockholm Syndrome. And if any of you remember Elizabeth Smart, when she was kidnapped, and she was returned safely, or escaped safely, she still had ties to her kidnapper, because they become your source for all things: food, shelter, water, emotional support, physical touch, all of it. And narcissist does that too, because they isolate you and you become reliant on them for almost everything. And you wait on those good times, because at the beginning there's this great good time, and then it becomes more intermittent. So I remember just saying, well, if I can just get to where we were, and I did that for 16 years, if I can just get the man back I had at the beginning. Well, it doesn't work that way, because that person doesn't really exist. That's a trauma bond.
Gotcha. Yeah. Interesting. Any other roadblocks that you see are common?
Forgiving yourself. It's hard to do that. Sometimes it's difficult to do that. Friends and family that go, oh, but he's such a great guy. Oh, but she's such a great woman. No, they haven't lived where you live. I invite them to come over one day, right, and really walk in your shoes, which isn't possible. They wouldn't want to stay either. So you just have to turn off those voices and know deep down in your heart, you're doing what's best for you and possibly your children.
Right. Yeah. And I want to ask you more about the children, if people are co-parenting, in a second, but I'm curious about, right, forgiving yourself. Like, in your experience, since this began for you as a child, I know that can be really hard, because as children, we tend to believe that it's all our fault if our parent isn't happy or isn't nice or what have you. Can you share a little bit about how you were able to come to self-forgiveness around that relationship?
I learned through reading and therapy that narcissists don't change. And that's what I believe, Andy. They can go to therapy, they can go to support groups, all of those things. They learn to change their behaviors in some ways, but the core of that person isn't going to change. And it made me realize there's nothing I could have done. I could have been the best daughter ever, the best wife ever, but nothing would have changed that situation, because narcissists don't change.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that definitely helpful in your journey of that forgiveness.
Right.
I'm curious, like when you talk about narcissists, are you talking about people who have been like diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder versus just kind of like a generic term narcissists?
I'm talking about that person who's truly someone who has NPD or narcissistic personality disorder. Studies show they're about 6% in the US. That's what the American Psychological Association says. But I think that number is greater. I think we're closer to 10 or 12% because when are you going to get a narcissist into therapy to be diagnosed?
Right.
So I think that number is greater. I remember hearing a therapist say to me, he thinks about 20% of the US population is emotionally healthy. So that leaves you with 80% that are really struggling with mental health disorders or abuse from childhood, whatever it may be.
God, that's so hard to hear that number because it's just
I
like
know.
that's so many people. And I mean, do you know any statistics on like globally? I mean, obviously we have our own challenges in the US, but are there less, is there less narcissism in different countries? Do you know?
I have worked with, I don't know of any statistics globally, but I can tell you I've worked with so many clients from all over the world. Austria recently, Australia, even New Zealand, that whole part of the world, and Canada. One of my longest clients was from Canada. It was a gentleman who had married a narcissistic woman and was divorcing her after 20 years. So it happens to anybody.
Gotcha.
That you can find yourself in a relationship with a narcissist.
Mm-hmm. And, I think in so often in our society and becoming more aware of this topic, people think men versus women, but do you have what kind of experience do you have in working with people about how many women are also narcissistic? I mean, you grew up with one, so.
Yes, some studies in psychology show that there are more men than women that are narcissists. But as far as the level of narcissism goes, I have worked with some men and their wives sound like Cruella de Vil, remember from the Disney movie? I mean, Run. And they've really struggled with, getting out and healing because there's so much damage. Women can be just as nasty as a male narcissist.
Yeah. Got it. Well, thank you for that. So you mentioned a little bit ago something around the children. So if someone's in a relationship with a narcissist and they have kids, do you have any tips, tricks, advice for those people on how to navigate that kind of co-parenting role if they're trying to, let's say, get out of that relationship?
Number one, there's no such thing as co-parenting with a narcissist. You have to parent like you do. It's often parallel parenting or perpendicular parenting, if you know what I mean. You've got to do what's best for you and your child and keep your rules at your house the way you want them. And I always call it deprogramming. When my son would be over at his father's and he would come in, I would give him a minute, feed him a snack, let him get acclimated, and then we would start our deprogramming. I'd be like, you can't talk to me that way. You may use those words elsewhere. You never really want to talk poorly about the other parent because their identity's half in that parent. But I would say, we don't speak that way at this house. I give him a couple of chances that first day. And if he kept doing it, it was timeout or his phone's taken away. And eventually he learned my rules at mom's are way different, and that's okay.
Yeah. Interesting. And how old was your son when you guys split up?
He was 8 years old.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. That's gotta be I would imagine, a challenging thing. Exactly. Right. Cause if you can't be a co-parent, then you can't talk about what kind of common goals you have as parents together. And therefore you're not, if there's different ways of interacting, then there's gotta be, I guess, different sets of rules wherever you are. So.
Right. So I really relied on my mom network, Andy, when I needed to make a decision, say about punishment, like he was acting out in class or something, the teacher called me, he goes, Carson won't sit still. I would ask one of my mom friends, what would you do? Here's what I'm thinking. And we would bounce ideas off each other because you don't get that from a narcissist. You can imagine if you call them, right, it would be, well, you haven't taught him how to sit still. It's all your fault.
Right.
So learn to use a healthier network.
Well, I'm glad that you had that. That supportive group of mothers. That's great. So, since you've gone through this personally, do you have suggestions for people on if they're in this space of wanting to leave a relationship with a narcissist, on things that they could do or avoid doing, right? Avoid certain roadblocks along the way. Any thoughts there?
I wrote a whole book on this. It's called Girl Get Out, and it's like a roadmap to exiting a relationship with a narcissist. But I will give you like the 30,000 foot view, the most important things. Don't tell them what you're doing. Act like you've always acted. Start saving money. I even put money in a shoebox in the closet, and knowing he would never look in that shoebox. It's like for 9 West sandals or something. I met with a divorce attorney and just said, I'm not ready to do this, but I want to ask you some questions about what I need to do if I'm going to do it. You start gathering information. And it doesn't mean that you have to leave, but if it makes you feel more powerful and it gives you more clarity, and in the end, you'll be surprised at the strength you do have to leave when it's time.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And don't leave until you'll know. It was like this light bulb went off. I can tell you where I was sitting. I was looking outside, watching my son and his best friend play in the backyard. And the narcissist says something horrible to me. And I thought, I'm done. I'm done. And I thought, nothing can be worse than this. And I was correct. Life gets better.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that right epiphany moment, right?
Because you'll know, everyone I've spoken to says they knew. They knew. It's just this confidence. And you're like, where's that coming from? But you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gotcha. And anything else you could share for people who also are like have a narcissistic parent like you do, as far as, no contact versus relationship with parents? How do you navigate that?
There's a lot of guilt when you don't spend, and they'll give you the shame, right? But internally, there can be guilt when you don't spend a lot of time with your parents, but you've still got to learn to put yourself first and your emotions and your emotional health. And I've learned that, like at Christmas. My parents just left visiting a few days ago, and it was 2 nights and 3 days. And that was my limit. That I know emotionally, that's all I can still handle, because she's so critical. And it sets me back. And each time they do it, I'm still getting better every single time. Each time that we visit, I'm getting stronger, and her cutting remarks don't hurt. But you just want to protect yourself, and I want to protect my peace, and it's not worth that.
Yeah. And so in those moments, for people who also have that experience of like being put down or criticized or belittled by their narcissistic parent, like, how do you defend yourself? Do you stay quiet? How do you deal with that?
I don't defend myself, because then that just opens a whole can of worms. But also, I don't stay quiet. I do something like I change the subject, or I go, Mom, you can feel that way, but I like my hair like it is. She wants me to have this hair past my ears. I'm like, I like my hair like it is. Or, I know you raised my brother and me this way, but this is how I'm raising Carson. It's not like you're wrong, you're crazy, because then that really can start a war. But that's what I do.
Yeah. And do you think do you have to come to some level of like acceptance of who she is? And does that come into your journey?
It's funny that you asked that, because after this last visit, she was extremely nice. And I started rethinking, and then I stopped myself, because I said, has she changed? And I'm like, Laura, please, you do this to help people. You've been doing this for years. No, of course she hasn't. She was just in a good space. Yeah. And was kind probably 90% of the time. And I started going, is she really a narcissist? Then I remembered everything else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a common thing to, have some kind of, we still have whatever kind of bond that we have with parents just because they're our parents. I think so many of us do, even if the relationship is not much of anything at this point, but, exactly. the hope of wanting it to be something different, for sure.
For sure. Yeah. And there's sadness that comes with that. Right. So grieve that. If you're going through that, grieve that.
Yeah. I think that's important. Absolutely.
Because both of my parents, they're not in terrible health, but not the greatest, because he's checking things out. They are, mid 70s, getting closer to 80. And I know no one lives forever. So it's just thinking about, how am I going to grieve what never was? Because I'll never have that.
Right.
Just letting that go. Yet another dream, right? When we divorce our partners, we have to grieve that relationship and open that lane up for true love. So I have to grieve that relationship and realize that will never be. but I find it elsewhere from my friends, from boyfriends when I'm dating and in a healthy relationship. So.
Mhm. Yeah. Have you ever done, I'm curious, like inner child work comes to mind, right? Like for people who have worked or, gone through what you've gone through. Have you done a lot of that?
Yes, incredible. Have you? It's incredible.
I have done. Yeah. Yeah.
Experiential therapy. Yes, I just started it about a year ago because I've done all the cognitive work, and it's amazing. We did this exercise the other day where we tapped into child Laura and then adult Laura in 5 years. And the one in 5 years is even stronger. And I don't want to say powerful, but just confident. And her self-esteem is just like the bomb. And I'm like, so I'll be going through the day and I'll be like, okay, you've got to tap into little Laura right now and soothe her. And then I'll tap into Laura in 5 years and say, what's going on here? And she gives me courage. It's just bizarre how it works, but it does.
Yeah. Yeah. It is very interesting. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that.
I'm glad you did that too. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a definite, I think it's a really empowering journey to be able to resource yourself, so to speak, and be able to, figure out how to soothe oneself without anyone external. Not that we don't have our relationships to help us in that as well, but, at the end of the day, sometimes we need to just be able to, soothe our own inner child and be able to, give them that love that we always deserved, I think.
Right. I agree. Oh, yeah. I agree. And it's a very sweet moment when you do it,
Yeah.
It'll make me cry if I talk about it, but it's a sweet moment. Just, I picture myself as 3 or 4 for some reason. And I see her sitting there scared and feeling unloved. And I'm like, it's okay. I love you. It's okay. You're awesome. And it's powerful.
Yeah. I mean, making me tear up over here too.
It works. So if any of you are looking for like a next step in your healing process, it has worked for me. I'm not saying it was right for you. Maybe ask your therapist, but it really helped.
Yeah. Great. And then you mentioned a couple minutes ago, Laura, about dating. And I'm curious, like, how, in your experience and for other people who have had similar experiences, how do you go into dating by being aware of red flags and things like that, and not repeating the cycle of getting together with another narcissist? Any thoughts there?
Do some healing work before you get out there to date. However, personally, I did not listen to give yourself a year, give yourself 2 years, because I'm a people person. I recharge as an introvert, but I also like to be out among people. It just makes me feel good. So I do both. So I wanted to date just to meet people. And so I did, but I was careful not to get into a relationship. And at the first minute I saw a narcissistic trait or what I thought was one, I would kindly exit stage left.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so use your internal barometer on that. If you get depressed sitting at home and you don't have a lot of friends, maybe you start dating or join a meetup group first, or you just really have to see what works best for you. The trouble is when people, I think you'll agree with me, Andy, they get out of one relationship, say, or a relationship with a narcissist, and literally start dating the next day. It's a train wreck waiting to happen because you're so hurt.
Right. Yep. Been there, done that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. That kind of describes my younger years of, going from one to the next. And it could be over a 24-hour period of time if one thing ended, for sure. Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Not leaving much space for healing and, working on oneself.
And if you think, oh, I don't have time to do that, I've got to, get another partner quickly. Think of the time as healing as an investment, and then you're going to get such a good partner that it'll be worth that time that you put in with healing. Yeah. It's just worth it, because when I haven't done the healings, when I date as my dad would say, a real turkey.
Right.
That's what he says.
I love that. That's cute. I love that. Before we start wrapping up here, I'm curious, like, if you had one piece of advice for our audience on their healing journey from narcissistic trauma, what would it be?
It's give yourself grace. This is not your fault. You're where you are. These people are good. They can pull the wool over therapist eyes, psychiatrist eyes, you name it, they can do it. The woman who invented World Narcissistic Abuse Awareness Day, is a therapist who is in a narcissistic relationship. And she's not ashamed of it. She's like, he pulled the wool over my eyes for several years.
Mhm. Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
you just have to go, okay, these people are good. Now I know, and it won't happen again.
Right. Now you're aware. Awesome.
Mhm.
Thank you. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your free gift that you have for everyone. And there's a link below that links over to your site. So what is it?
It's an ebook on 7 steps to plan on leaving the narcissist. It'll give you some of the things that Andy and I just spoke about, plus a few more.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, thank you for
Yeah.
that. Do you
You're
have
welcome.
any last insights? Anything else we've left out that you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Not really. Animals are great while you're healing, if you're an animal person. Andy has a doodle. I have 2 of them. They're crazy. One is Charlie and the other one is Maggie, but I call her J-Lo because she's such a diva. Like, she will not eat her food till it's perfect.
Oh my
But
goodness.
it's fun to have that unconditional love while you're healing, because they love you no matter if you go to Europe and come back or the mailbox and come back. You get this
Right.
greeting that's
It's pretty extraordinary. Yes. Highly recommend animals to people, whether you're a dog lover or cat lover or who knows, a potbelly pig, because they're awesome too.
maybe this too. It just crossed my mind. So that means I probably need to say it, is where you are today isn't going to be the rest of your life. This is a moment in time. You got this. It's going to be okay. So keep doing what you're doing. A lot of people couldn't even survive this much of what you've been through. Keep doing what you're doing and work on getting out. And your life's not going to be like this forever.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for doing this again.
You're welcome. I love it. It's my pleasure. I feel a connection with you and then everyone that you know. So I'm happy to help.
Well, right back at you. And thank you for AVAIYA students also who are watching or listening right now, because we love you and we're so glad that you've shown up for yourself today so powerfully.
Aw.
Yeah.
Well, we love you too, Charlie and I. J-Lo's outside.
That's right. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Laura. Thank you,
You're welcome.
everyone. We'll see you again real soon. Take care. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this latest class with Laura Charanza. She was back with us today to talk about overcoming roadblocks to your healing. I always enjoy my conversations with Laura, and I think she does such a great job of sharing her own personal journey, right? Obviously, having grown up with a narcissistic mother and then having married a person who is narcissistic, and just the journey that she's undergone in order to heal from that and continuously be aware of that in her life. So if that's something that you also relate to, having a narcissistic parent and then marrying someone like that or in partnership or what have you, I definitely encourage you to look further into Laura's work and different ways that you can help yourself through those challenges. So thank you as always for being here. We'll see you again soon. Take care.
AVAIYA has changed my life.
AVAIYA has made me the woman I am today.
AVAIYA is my home.
AVAIYA is personal freedom.
AVAIYA is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about AVAIYA.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, AVAIYA, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.